Okay. Rohini Nakshatra. So it's ruled by the moon, the power to grow. It's really more of a swelling, right? It's that swelling of pregnancy. Rohini has a lot to do with that. Well, when a woman's pregnant, she kind of blushes, right? She gets a little bit more redness into her cheeks and her chest and things like this, similar to when we get sexually excited. We kind of get these reddening of the chest, face can get a little bit red. And so there's that reddish kind of glow with Rohini. It's the, if we look up into the stars, it's the red eye of the bull, of the Taurus, is Rohini. It's a little Aldraban, they call it. And so this, well, I mentioned this sort of redness, in pregnancy and the growing and swelling, right? The breasts swell, the stomach swell, everything's kind of starts to swell in Rohini. And so it's a very fertile nakshatra, one of the most fertile nakshatras. So also for agriculture and things like that, for growing, it's like that stage, I think, where the seed is it sort of swells and then splits open, and then you get a sprout coming. And so it's just kind of at that stage. And there's a lot of heat, a lot of warmth sort of being generated in it. It's also one of the symbols for Rohini is a prepubescent girl. So it's like the little girl just before she's hitting puberty sort of thing. Maybe whatever, 12 years old. Well, these days it's probably more like 9 or 10. But say like that sort of age anyways. And these girls are generally they're very sweet. And it's very often quite easy to make them blush and make them embarrassed a little bit. And so Rohini is that blushing. Rohini is kind of a lot of innocence in Rohini as well. It's like that, again, if we talk about the prepubescent girl, it's like that stage where we really want to protect them. We really want to defend them, that innocence, that really beautiful innocence that they've had before they kind of reach sexual maturity. And so that's kind of Rohini. It has a lot to do with these sorts of ideas of innocence and fertility. Now, so I find this interesting here because they say the main deity for this is Brahma. Of course, he's the creator god. And well, that's what's fertility is, right? It's creation, procreation, you could say. But I find this has as much to do with Brahma's daughter, who's Saraswati, as it does with Brahma. Again, it's that sense of daughter. And I don't know, some of the stuff can sound really bad, maybe. Rohini is like, it's almost that stage we need to protect them because that innocence is also very naive, sort of, and very curious, you could say. And so there's this sort of need to protect, especially at that age. But in a way, it's like the more traditional societies really want to protect that innocence. That innocence of the young girl is really the great treasure. And it's a lot to do with possibility in Rohini, because they're still, well, they haven't reached sexual maturity yet. And so they're still all really about possibility. And in a way, Brahma is as well. Can bring any kind of possibilities in. We find Sage Atri is related, and he's actually mostly famous. Again, it's like Brahma, but this has more to do with his daughter. And here we see Sage Atri, and he's mostly famous for having a really wonderful marriage with his wife. And she actually doesn't stay with the 7 sisters. She goes and lives with the sages, with her husband in the stars. So she's actually part of the, what do they call it? The Big Dipper. And that's the great sages. Well, she hangs out over there. There's a little bit of, we kind of went over some of this. I guess it's a different nakshatra. I'll leave it. There's always some overlaps in these nakshatras somehow. And so we're talking about the 7 sisters. Well, that's Pleiades, the Kritika. And so now we have that Anusha. And actually in India, the women will oftentimes, they'll pray to that star Anusha for good marriage, good husbands. We see Dattatreya. Oh yeah, she's the one that had the baby of the three gods. Dattatreya is one of the main gods I sort of worship, actually. I've written about him and shared about him a little bit on Instagram, and he's this god that he had no guru, actually. He's an incarnation of Shiva. What happened was Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, they heard about that as Anusha and how wonderful of a wife she was and how pure she was. And they were like, that can't be possible. Let's go down and test her. Tricky gods, right? They're always testing people. So they go down and they show up at her house as sages, as three gurus, as three babas, sadhus. And really how it works is, especially a Brahmin family, they kind of have to do anything a baba says. When baba says it, they have to do it. They have to give that baba what they ask for. And so these babas came in and they said, yeah, we want you to feed us naked. And Anusha's like, what? Oh my God, how this is a terrible thing. How do I do this? And so she went off to the side and she made a little prayer. Remember, anyway, she made a prayer, and so she came back in the room where the gods were, and they were all transformed into little babies. And so she took each one of them and she fed them each from her own breast. And so then after they were fed and they were full and they got their wish as sadhus, she got dressed again and they came back to their life, and they were so impressed by this. They thought, wow, this is just amazing. She was able to fulfill her vow and maintain her chastity here. And now that us gods have milked from her own breast, she's like her own mother. And so we'll give her, they each gave her a baby. So Dattatreya was Shiva's baby, the little three-headed, and he hangs out with cows and dogs and this sort of thing. Very, very special to the Natha Babas. Those are the main guys I kind of see when I go to India, or hang out with, I guess. Durvasa. I like Durvasa, right? He gains spiritual power whenever he curses someone. He's a little bit angry, sort of a god. And there's lots of stories about him cursing different people and this sort of thing. It was him who cursed, how did that work? Indra. Yeah, when the whole churning of the ocean of milk thing came, I think it was a curse he gave to Indra, because he gave Indra some special garland, and Indra put it on his elephant. His elephant shook it off and it landed on the ground. And Durvasa was always looking for a reason to get mad, so he got mad. And then we had the whole churning of the milk, and wow, everything got out of control. So yeah, we get these sort of, all three gods sort of come under Atri's leadership. And so we'll find people that have these placements will find this sort of lineages and these sort of gods into their belief. I'm going to kind of skip through some of this a little bit quick. So we've been through this and you guys kind of understand how to read it. I don't know if I talked much about the faces, the way these nakshatras are facing upward, downward, or straight ahead. And so Rohini's facing upward, and so that usually suggests like more hope, that sort of upward looking, very hopeful sort of a thing. And it's more broad, I guess. They're very broad, very open sort of people. They also say that this has something to do with the way we come out of the womb, actually. And so facing upwards is kind of face first in a way, head first. And you'll get the other ones facing down, can sometimes be backwards, this kind of thing. They also say that, I'm not so sure about this, but they say that the nakshatras, by the way they're facing is when the main results will come. So I believe facing upwards, the results generally come very early in the nakshatra period of a planet that's in Rohini. But that's theory sort of thing, so I haven't really fully studied it. Then we get, well, it's a fertility symbol, and so of course we get a male cobra. Well, cobras like to live in trash piles. They like to live where nobody else is gonna go, where nobody else is gonna show up. I should mention actually, so Brahma, so I would say Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. So we hear about a lot of people worshiping Vishnu, Vishnava sort of philosophy. That includes Krishna and the 10 avatars, and a lot of that stuff are the Vishnu worshippers. And then you got a lot of Shiva worshippers. But then it's kind of like, well, where are the Brahma worshippers? There's not really a spiritual path for Brahma. And this has a lot to do with his pride and things like this. He was a bit of he could lie, he had too much pride. These kind of things really broke in on him. And so he got punished. And so eventually Shiva ended up punishing him and saying, well, first he said, nobody's going to worship you and you won't have any temples. And Brahma said, oh my God, you can't do that. I'm a God, I need something. And so you can have one. So there's actually one temple to Brahma in Pushkar. It's the one place where they kind of worship Brahma. And it's funny, a lot of these stories I tell about Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh and stuff, I tell from a very Shiva perspective. And so if you go to Pushkar, you'll hear the same stories, but from Brahma's perspective. I don't know so much Brahma's perspective because he's whatever. Now I wondered about this, like why don't they worship Brahma? Why don't they worship the creator? You'd think, oh my God, the creator, he's the greatest, he made everything. But in another sense, it's like, well, he made it already. It's already here. Forget about him. He did his job. And so then they worship Vishnu because we want to maintain what we have. And we worship Shiva because we're afraid of losing it, basically. And we don't pay too much attention to Brahma. And so the Jambula tree, yeah, this says jams, but I think they use Jambula for their pickles sometimes as well. But anyways, it's a very sort of a common fruit, kind of a condiment they use it for. And it helps to, actually, it's really good for like bloating. You know, you feel that sort of swelling, that growth in the stomach, that bloating sort of thing. And this is the medicine, basically, the Jambula fruit. You get, so Rohini is Moon's Mula Trikona, which is kind of like his office. His, yeah, it's like the exaltation is like his best friend's house. Mula Trikona is kind of like the office, and his own sign is kind of like just being at home. And so the Mula Trikona is his kind of his second best degrees.
What would be the best?
Pardon me?
So the second best degree for moon is 27 degrees in Taurus. So what would the first one be for the moon?
The first one would be
Cancer.
this exaltation is, I think it's like 3 degrees. I think it's back in just at the very end of Kritika. I don't have that on my sheet here, but I believe his exaltation is 3 degrees Taurus, which would put him at the end of or at the very end of Kritika, beginning of Taurus. So Moon quite likes Taurus, and there's actually, well, that last degree of Kritika was Pushkara Navamsha, and now we got another Pushkara Navamsha and Rohini. So there's some quite special places within Taurus, and Rohini again is quite fertile and really good for kind of any kind of growth. Like people will invest money and it will grow, and Rohini are just, you kind of want a Rohini person in your life somehow for materialist purposes.
And Mula Trikona means what exactly? Because I see that in multiple places.
Well, mula means root. So you see mula gets used all over the root, all over the place. Mula Trikona, I'm not exactly sure because the Trikona means basically a trine.
Yeah.
So the trine and so maybe it's referring to this idea that there is the exaltation, rulership, and Mula Trikona. And so maybe this is the root of those 3. I'm not really sure. That's a really good question, actually. So, and actually then, so the main avenue for worship of Brahma is actually Krishna. one of the avatars of Brahma. And so, of course, you get lots of Krishna worshippers all over the place. And so Krishna becomes quite important with Rohini as well. And there is a lot of, yeah, we'll leave that alone. But there's we'll see later on, there's some quite devout Krishna devotees here. They, oh, you can see this Lord Krishna's astrology chart, born in 3227 BC. So the classics say that, and this is wrong because the classics say that his moon is in Rohini. So this is showing Rashesha.
They
So
got Krishna's birth time wrong? What is that?
apparently, yeah, I got it wrong. It matches. Anyways, I remember looking, I pulled it from another online and it matches the chart, but I just noticed now that the moon isn't in Rohini on this, so I don't know what I did wrong. All the planets are in the same place. But this is funny, you know, like I'm not sure about this because Rohini is the reddish one and Krishna's blue. And so his sun is in Purva Falguni, which is blue, and very much Krishna blue. And so I don't know, he's a king, and so maybe his son should be in the ascendant, actually. Anyway, so in little things like this, that's the fun of someone like Lord Krishna's chart. We can argue on the demerits of Lord Krishna.
I'm gonna have to call the hospital and ask what's up with that, because they got this wrong.
Yeah, well, they did. They put something in there wrong. Yeah, we'll have to. Well, they said close to midnight. Anyways, there's a mistake in there. They got this from the Mahabharata, I think, his birth time. They figure it out. They sort of give a few clues. He was born with his moon in Rohini, and this planet was there, and these people put the stuff together. So you can get charts for most of the gods. So Rohini, anything you want to grow. The days when the moon is passing through Rohini or transiting through Rohini, anything you want to grow, anything you want to sort of stay and get bigger and like that, you can start on a day of Rohini. Really good for planting gardens and the agricultural stuff like that. As I mentioned, it's a great day for sex, especially if you want a baby, that sort of thing. And there's actually, like, when you follow the Hindi calendar, I remember it was a Ganesha day coming up in the calendar, and special day for Ganesha. And Sanjay, my Guruji, is all kind of like doing all this stuff for Ganesha day. And I'm like, what's going on, man? Like, why are you so excited about Ganesha this year? And he got married I think it was a little bit less than a year before. And so what happens is when you get married, that very first Ganesha day becomes a very special day. Anyways, it becomes a very special day for them to have sex and a very auspicious day for children. And I have a feeling for that Ganesha day, there was probably something going through Rohini as well to make that such a fertile day. And so I don't know if it would be his first sex with his wife, but it's basically scheduled in the Panchang calendar. And so basically everybody in India knows that anybody who got married that year is having sex on this day. It's like everybody get out of the house for the day or something. The whole family's living in one room. I remember asking Sanjay one time, I was like, well, how does that work then? Like, how do you ever get to have sex with your wife? He's like, basically, you find a day when some of the family is out. You catch your wife when she's walking past the bathroom, you pull her in the bathroom, you have sex as fast as you can, and then you throw her out. So that's a modern Indian mating ritual. So, so then we get these stories and symbols of Rohini. Just give me 1 second, I gotta get some water.
Yeah.
There you go. So we get these stories. So this is Brahma. They showed a nice red Brahma. That red, it's that sort of like, again, it's that redness that's kind of comes out. And when there's some sexual excitement, when there's some heat, when there's a bit of passion, you could say. I'm breaking my room. So then another one of the stories, one of the main stories of Brahma is he decided he wanted to create a universe, create a world. And so he thought, well, how can I do this? And, well, I need a woman to mate with. And at the time, there was only his children, his mind-born children. And most of them were sons, most of them were boys, except he had the one daughter. And so he started thinking about this, and he kind of watching his daughter and thinking, geez, I was going to create a universe. And so this is when his head started to spring up, so he could keep an eye on her, kind of infatuation. And I think there is a bit of that in Rohini as well. So some infatuation kind of came up in him, and he started just everywhere she went. And so she eventually, we get into some of this later, she eventually turned into a deer and tried to jump up into the heavens to run away. And then he sprouted his fifth head. And there's different stories. Some have Shiva come along as Rudra with his bow and arrow and shoot Brahma in the thigh at that moment and say, like, just give your daughter some privacy. And others have him chopping off one of those fifth heads at that time. So Shiva chops off Brahma's heads in a few stories. And again, it's kind of this, Brahma has he doesn't really have a good reputation. Like full of pride and lying and chasing after his own daughters and all kinds of stuff like this. But in a sense, it was like, I don't know, there was a kind of a higher purpose there. So eventually he did end up sleeping with his daughter, and that's how we all became here. And so that happened. So, oh yeah, and then there's this like, so the 27 nakshatras are actually the 27 daughters of Daksha. Well, he has more than 27 daughters, or 27 children, I'm sure. But anyway, so the 27 daughters of Daksha are the nakshatras. And Rohini is ruled by moon. This was the nakshatra, yeah. Why don't I have that story in here? I don't think I do. Anyways, this is the point where actually the moon came along, and I believe Rohini. Oh my God, now I'm getting confused between Rohini and Pushya. I think this is the one. Chandra. Because they say the favorite wife of Chandra. Anyways, I'm going to skip that because I think I'm getting confused with another nakshatra. It's funny because a lot of these stories kind of blend in together. And so this is a favorite wife of Chandra, but Chandra also, he did this thing with Brahma's wife. He had a big affair with Brahma's wife, and that's how Mercury came about, actually, through this affair of moon with Chandra with Jupiter's wife, Tara. And so they had a little affair, and he eventually got pregnant, and there was a big scandal, of course, with all the gods. And in the end, they ended up going back. The wife went back to Jupiter, and Moon kind of left her alone, but she went back pregnant. And so Mercury ends up being the child of the moon, but is raised by Jupiter. There's, I think, some of that because the favorite wife, the most beautiful wife, the most bountiful wife. Obviously, Rohinis make great wives. We'll see down below, Angelina Jolie has this, and what's her name? Marilyn Monroe has this as well. Here's another, you can see Brahma sitting on the lotus with all his heads. his pride got him into so much trouble. This was, yeah, I think I told this story last time about Kartikeya. It was with Brahma, his Guruji, Brahma, and yeah, I asked him not if he knew the meaning of the universe, asked me if he knew the meaning of your home. And so Brahma's pride ended up getting quite hurt in this. Some say he put Brahma in prison for pride. Brahma was always like, yeah, there's every story he's in, he ends up being a little bit the villain somehow. It's kind of interesting, but it's at the same time, it's like all of this creation is a bit of a villain in a sense, because we look at it as karma, and we generally think of karma as being this sort of bad thing. And so Brahma is kind of this creator of all this karma we have to deal with in a sense. And so it's like, well, what the hell, Brahma? Right? He gave me all this to deal with, and now I got to talk with Vishnu and I talk with Shiva. You read the stories about the Navratri celebration, when Durga Ma comes and slays the demon and all of this sort of thing. That's Brahma. Where is he here? He's on his lotus leaf. And this is actually a lotus branch. It's growing. Vishnu is laying back on Sesha, the five-headed snake, floating on the eternal pond, I guess you could say. And a lotus flower growing out of his navel. And Brahma is living on the lotus flower. And actually the whole Saptasati Durga story, it comes out where this demon is coming for Brahma. And Brahma's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Vishnu, wake up, man. Wake up, Vishnu. You'll have to help me, man. There's something happening. And Vishnu's like, oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. And so then he prays to Shiva. And so Shiva then sends his Shaktis and saves the day. And so that's Brahma. And so if you think about that in a way, Brahma becomes quite small because he's just living on a lotus flower out of Vishnu's navel. Like, compared to Vishnu, he's nothing in a sense. So there's that. I got a little nice quote here from the Dhammapada. This is actually a Buddhist book. We are what we think, all that arises in our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make our world. Prajapatis, I think I've got another section down here about Brahma's pride. And the Prajapatis are basically just the fathers, the great fathers, the great protectors of society, of the world. There's all kinds of different lists you'll find. I put down 7 Prajapatis, 10, 16, 21. I think there's a list of 9 Prajapatis, and so they get kind of broken up into different ways. But that's a sort of fatherly figure, protective. Again, that way that we want to protect the young girl and that the innocence. And so that Brahma and the Prajapatis want to protect that innocence. They want to protect their children. There's a few things here. Parjanya, again, you're going to get different lists of Adityas. One of the lists I found listed them as the 8th Aditya. One of the sun gods are the Adityas. We'll get to Aditi, goddess Aditi later in the Nakshatras. But she's basically the mother of all the sun gods. So you got Aditi and then the Adityas. So like this. And this we can see gets connected a little bit with the bull also as a fertility symbol. Right? So Rohini, and really the Rohini part is probably the most fertile part of the Taurus. And the bull is often used as a fertility symbol. I was talking about, I think I mentioned some of these tribal areas. I think I was talking to you guys yesterday about this. And some of these tribal areas I walked through where they didn't really worship anything. And I was thinking about that later, and I was like, actually they did worship. They didn't really worship the gods as gods, but they worshiped the bull. They worshiped Nandi. They worshiped Shiva through the bull. And that was because that's all they used up in the hills for all their work was these bulls, these kind of short little, not very big bulls they were using, but bulls. And so they worshiped that sort of fertility aspect of the bull. We get Daksha. I don't know if you know who Daksha is. Daksha was Parvati's father, for one, father of a lot, but it was Daksha's yagya that Shiva's destroyed, Daksha's fire ritual. So Daksha was Parvati's father, and he was throwing a big party one day and didn't invite Shiva and didn't invite Parvati. And Shiva didn't care. He was like, whatever. And Parvati was very upset by this. She's like, this is an affront to you, Lord Shiva. He's not showing you respect. He's not showing his daughter's husband respect. And she said, I'm going to go to the party. And Shiva said, no, it's not a good idea. I'm not going to tell you you can't go. If you want to go, go. But I'm telling you right now, it's not a good idea. And she said, well, I'm going. So off she went to her papa's party. And everyone kind of like knew when she showed up, everyone kind of went quiet and like, oh, geez, something's going to go on here. And so she went around the party and she went to her father and she said, like, what the hell? You don't invite Lord Shiva. And so Daksha, he trashed Lord Shiva, talked bad about him. And so Parvati said, this is nonsense. And that's actually where we get the sati stones from, that sense of self-immolation of the wife. And this is actually a big pride thing, this sort of self-immolation. So it basically hurt the pride of Parvati's family. And so she burned herself up there at the yagya, threw herself on the fire in a way. When you go to Varanasi, you'll see these little stones, just a little stone pillar, maybe 2 or 3 feet high maximum. And it'll just have a little etching of a man and a woman standing beside each other on it. And that marks off, that's a sati stone. And that marks off a spot where the wife threw herself on the father's cremation fire. So she burned up with the father. And that kind of thing. But anyway, so after Sati burned herself up, Shiva knew this, he kind of sensed it, and so off he went. And he sent his demons, Virabhijija, can't pronounce his name offhand, I don't know where it's written. But anyway, so he sent his kind of big dragons in and destroyed the yagya, destroyed the ritual. And that's one of the things Shiva was very much famous for, is the destruction of Daksha's yagya, because that basically was the moment when ritual became less important. It could be thrown away, and that's partially, well, they say that Shiva destroyed the yagya, but actually it was Daksha by not inviting Shiva, because you can't have Shiva's sacrifice, and you can't have a ritual without sacrifice. And so in a way, Daksha was trying to do that, and so it didn't work. And so that's Daksha. We see Krishna. A lot of times it's like not just Krishna, Radha Krishna would really be the symbol here more than just Krishna by himself. You see Radha, the reddish one, usually a lot of blush in her cheeks, and that's a kind of fertility symbols in art when they give that blushing bride, right? Kind of idea. And so we get, and Krishna is the moon. And so Rohini is also ruled by the moon, and these sorts of things all come in. He was married. He was like any king, right? He had a wife. I think he had more than one wife, actually. But he wasn't in love with them. And eventually, at some point, he got very, very sick. And the guru came in and said, oh, you're going to have to, only the dust from the foot of a woman who loves him will save him. And so they went back to Krishna's kingdom to see his wives, and they were all queens and princesses. And so they had no dust on their feet. And so he didn't know what to do. He was very confused. And he went down by the water, by the river. I can't remember if this is Mathura, where he was born. His kingdom was in way over in Western India. Anyways, so they went, I think it was Western India they went. And so they didn't know what to do. They went down by the water and they were trying to think about how to figure this out. And these gopi girls, which are the milkmaids kind of thing, they or the washing girls washing clothes in the river, they were like, what's wrong? You look like you got some news about our beloved Lord Krishna. And he said, what do you mean, beloved Lord Krishna? He said, oh, we love Krishna more than anything. And these were all the poor girls, right? Just the milkmaids, the washer girls. And so their feet were completely covered in dust. So they took that dust and went and saved Krishna. So there's that. Krishna's a really pretty cheeky god, actually, because, well, he had his wives, but he was in love with all these girlfriends. And so nobody really knew what to do with that. Now, the banyan tree also gets connected with this. This isn't the tree of the nakshatra. This is kind of a symbol of the nakshatra. The tree is, oh, it's the jambu. Yeah. And so, but this gets, but the banyan tree is very much connected with the ancestors in a lot of ways. And it also, I think in this case, in Rohini, because it makes roots in a lot of places. Everywhere that branch touches the ground, it kind of makes a new root. And so in a way, it is this sort of swelling, this growth of a whole forest in a way from a single tree. Oh yeah, the Shivalingas are often, they're holy trees, these banyans. And so when I was in Goa, I don't know, Goa's kind of a party place, and so you don't really get these kind of nice temples. There's a few, there are some nice temples, but they're not as, I don't know, some of the places I go to, like Varanasi, there's a Shiva temple. Every step, basically, you're passing a Shiva temple, they're just everywhere. And so I used to go to sit under this banyan tree, and there was just a little tiny Shiva linga under there. And the women often worship the banyan trees because it's kind of also a lot of like the nature spirits and the fairies kind of live in these banyans. And so that's mostly the women who are worshiping these kinds of things. We talked about the prepudescent girls and that sort of daughter energy that's here, the favorite wife, the best wife, all of that kind of thing. You can read that on your own. This reading, I talked about the blushing and the swelling. This I found interesting because the fish is also a bit of a symbol for Rohini. And so I was looking into the fish and I knew it was a Christian symbol and I didn't really understand why. And now, as you can see, because it's a Greek symbol, Jesus Christ, Son of God, our Savior. And so it's just a short form of writing that in Greek, basically. But this is like, you could say in a sense, that idea of the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes also is a very big part of the stories. And that's also kind of a fertility thing, an abundance sort of thing. Could say the same a little bit. And this is one I was having a tough time with, the ox cart pulled by 2 oxen. And they're very clear about that, 2 oxen and not 1. Now, did a little bit of interesting research here about the difference between how much an oxen can haul compared to horses or donkeys. And it's like literally 10 times more. So I think, again, that has to do with that sort of abundance and that sort of fertility and that kind of thing. I didn't get too much into the health on Rohini. Still sort of trying to figure it out. But I did notice when I was going through, like adding a lot of the pictures to this Rohini of the people, a lot of them had like, there was one eye that was just something, there was an imbalance in the eyes, you could say. And so you could see there was some problem with one eye. Trigeminal neuralgia, probably didn't pronounce that right. But this is a thing that actually the nerve comes in from the temple lobe, and most of it comes down to the face, but some of it comes into the eyes and into the early forehead there. Brings a lot of pain. And a couple of the people that had this position, needs a bit more research here, but a couple of them had this sort of eye problem on the one side, due to a lot of, anyways, the nerves and stuff coming in through the forehead. Again, I'm kind of, when I'm doing this research, I'm kind of fishing, right? And so Rohini represents, they say, the shins, the calves, and the ankles. And so I'm trying to figure out like what kinds of problems can happen there. And so I just kind of listed, like, found what I can. And there's all kinds of those sort of little things, cramping and swelling and varicose veins and some problems with the arteries and some different things can happen. It's also very, that swelling, that growth is very cough. It's very phlegmy sort of nakshatra, a little bit sticky. Like that. And so any of these sort of illnesses relating with growth, and I haven't had a chance to quite do the research there, but it's hard sometimes because these stars don't really tell their whole history publicly, but I expect a lot of sort of swelling in the legs, ankle and problems and things like that. You can even say, like, when you get some trauma as well, what happens is it swells and it turns red. Get some little bit of inflammation in there. Talked about a lot of that stuff. No, I did also see there's a lot of addiction in Rohini. And I found this a little bit. Bharani, Kritika, Rohini. I found a lot of the people who had these placements. You see a lot of stars, like even from the 50s and 60s, when it wasn't such a huge deal to be dating a 13-year-old girl, for example. And so you find a lot of placements. They usually have some attractions to younger, quite young girls. And it depends on, well, it depends on the times that we live, partially. But then it would also depend on some affliction before they would actually sort of take action and that kind of thing. Because it can just be sort of that. Because it's a moon, all the moon nakshatras are a little bit parental. And so there can be just that sort of parental idea of wanting to protect the young girls and the youth and the innocence and all of those things. I did write a little bit about the hormonal issues. Again, moon nakshatras usually have something to do with the hormones and the estrogen, and again, the female sexual sexual development. A lot of that comes in here. We see a little thing like when men get high estrogen, they put on weight, diabetes, they get the kind of man boobs, they can have some erectile dysfunctions, a lot of different things like this. Again, a little bit more research needs to be done, but I would expect to see these sort of problems and a lot of these people that have this. Yeah, I mentioned already the red eye of the bull, that kind of anger. And it's Aldebaran is actually considered one of the 4 gateways, and I believe it's guarded over by one of the main angels. Do I have that in here? I didn't write that. I'm pretty sure it is one of the gateways. And then when you look in the Western astrology, these gateway nakshatras are ruled over by the angels, the archangels. So I'll let you kind of read over key points and that yourself, and let's just kind of dive down into charts and stuff. So I'm going to skip the ascendant because, again, like I've said before, I'm not 100% sure how correct the ascendants are. You can read the notes on that. You'll see some, well, we'll talk about these for a moment. Like guys like Salman Rushdie, Edward Snowden. Another thing, like Brahma has a lot to do with rights, actually. More the rights side of thing than the duty side of thing. But that's like Salman Rushdie, free speech, Edward Snowden, you could arguably also say a free speech sort of thing. Not sure who a couple of these people are. It's funny, you see these names like Priyanka Chopra. This shows her ascendant there. I mentioned that Angelina Jolie and Marilyn Monroe also had, like Priyanka Chopra, she's one of the most beautiful, she's like the Marilyn Monroe of India, you could say. One of the most beautiful, bountiful sort of women. And there is that, especially Rohini women, they'll often have the large breasts. They'll often have this nice hips, right? They're the perfect wife. And so what do you want for a wife? Someone who can bear children. Bigger hips, big breasts. Come on, baby, let's make a dozen. That kind of thing. And so Priyanka Chopra, and that's why these women are so lusted after or whatever. So like, that's why they're such sex symbols. Because they've got those kind of bountiful hips and bountiful breasts and all of that in Rohini. I hate to say the same about Kamala Harris, but there's her name, and she's got quite a reputation as well as being a bit of a I don't know, can I call her a sex symbol of the politics? Mostly people say she slept her way to the top, her position. I don't really know much about her. You get guys like Sheldon Anderson, casinos, resorts, that kind of thing. I think that's sort of, again, I'm not sure if his ascendant is actually Rohini. I'd have to check his birth time, but well, rich guy, political philanthropy, growing. I think he gets involved with like growing these movements in a sense, a little bit like Soros. Maybe on the other side of the political line, but a little bit similar, trying to grow this. My politics is like that too. You want to make some excitement, so that excitement sort of swells. And I found that there was actually quite a few, like Wayne Gretzky has positions here, Mario Lemieux has positions here, a lot of these sort of sports stars. And I think that relates with that, like you go into the stadium on playoff time, right? And the game gets going. It's really exciting, that swelling of excitement, right? You know how that excitement just seems to just fill the whole building, and it feels like the whole space is going to burst. That's Rohini. And so you get it kind of in different ways. Yeah, Jennifer Lopez, Georgia O'Keeffe. Veronica Varanasi also has this. So you can see some of the some of the people I know that have this position are actually quite involved in philosophy. Like Eric and Joel, they're both Kashmiri Shaivites actually, but a little bit more, especially Eric, leaning a little bit more towards Krishnaism, a little bit that side of things. And even Joel is big into, he's a music, well, he used to be a music guy, he does media production or something now. Ghislaine Maxwell, we talked about this with the younger girls and underage, and she's famous, sort of a pimp, I guess you could call her, for underage children. And also Rohini it's the moon, and so it's very watery in a sense as well. And a lot of that kind of stuff was kind of happening on an island as well. So get that. Someone like Susan Miller, she was the one who wrote the sun signs. And really, like, even as Vedic astrologers, anyone doing astrology in the West has to really give her a lot of credit, because in a way, if we think of the swelling, is astrology became very, very popular after Susan Miller. She's the one that really did a lot of work, a lot of good work to kind of bring astrology into the modern era, in a sense, with her sun sign books. And in a way, I would have to say that she's kind of, anyways, I remember reading her sun sign books when I was a kid, but she's kind of a mentor for me as well, because now I'm trying to write the moon sign books. And so we have to go with that. So then we get into the sun. You'll notice, I don't know if you had a chance to look, but as we go down, there'll be a lot more pictures of these people.
When you say a sun sign book, like she did the nakshatras for the sun, or
no, she's the one that first put out a book, like, so you could buy a book on Sagittarius, or you could buy a book on Scorpio. So she really, but I think her book was it's called The Sun Signs, I believe.
Name rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, and it's quite a good book. If you're an astrologer, you should read that, especially if you're doing astrology in the West. You should read that book. It's one of those books, like, I remember when I was a kid, I would see 3 copies of this at every garage sale, kind of thing. Just, I don't know how many of these she sold, but they just sold everywhere, and they're still selling as secondhand books and getting passed around, and God, I don't know, it must be 30 years ago or something she did that. So we get this kind of thing. It's interesting now, Sun and Rohini. Again, I see a good pile of Kashmiri Shivites and sort of a little bit sexy tantrics as well, and Krishna followers. That's kind of interesting. 1, 2, 3, a couple ashram people that own ashrams, actually run ashrams or head off ashrams or whatever, landowners, I guess. So you get that kind of thing. You can see in the second pada of the sun, especially, it seems the second pada can be quite challenging. JFK was assassinated. Eddie Gallagher was Navy SEAL. Rob Ford he was a Canadian premier, I think, or was he just a mayor of Toronto? Something like that. But he was one of these big fat guys with a big red face, which you can see that's both the swelling and the redness sort of relate there to a certain degree. Hugh Dillon is I don't know, like a rock star, I guess, Canadian rock star of some sort, some degree. A lot about death is his writing and his lyrics. Wild Bill Hickok killed a bunch of people. You get someone like Melissa Etheridge. And I noticed that also with Rohini, actually. A lot of the women I found that had Rohini they were lesbians, which I found quite interesting. Melissa Etheridge was a famous lesbian. She's I don't know, pop or country singer. I don't know if she still puts out albums. I don't even know if she's still alive. But when I was a kid, she used to put out albums a little bit. Rudy Giuliani, he's a little bit like the Rob Ford character, kind of a fat guy, red face, always getting a little bit too excited. Both of them probably have heart problems. We get into the third pada, and I think the third one was the Pushkara pada, actually. And so you get
What's Pushkara again?
Pushkara is the nourishing point.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's usually quite strong. And so you get someone like, well, Peter the Great and Russell Brand, Clint Eastwood, Morgan, like a lot of really big names here. Allen Ginsberg. I was just looking into Allen Ginsberg. We'll see him down below. He wrote the great poem, Howl. I don't know if you've read that poem. You should really read that poem. He was the, in a sense, he was the definition of the beatnik generation. And that term actually got applied mostly to him, and in a sense it got applied to anyone that he kind of hung out with at the time. And not all of those, well, we call them beatniks now, but not all of them really liked the term, and they didn't like being associated with him either. But a lot of that got driven out of it through Allen Ginsberg. He was the first one to bankroll the Hare Krishnas when they came to the USA. He helped them build their first temple, did so much to spread the chanting, especially the Hare Krishna chanting. He got pop singers and rock singers to do it at their concerts. And he had big sit-ins at universities where he just chanted for hours, I think even days sometimes, Hare Krishna. So he was this kind of Hare Krishna beatnik Jewish poet, I guess. Fairly controversial in his time because he was bringing a lot of awareness into homosexuality and the drug scene and these kind of things. They kicked him out of some countries he traveled to. And anyway, so all this stuff was quite taboo. And so that's Allen Ginsberg. But someone like Morgan Freeman, we see Andy Griffith right underneath him. They are kind of, especially Andy Griffith, kind of protector figures, and I think Morgan Freeman as well did a lot to kind of help protect young actors and help bring them up. He's also, I don't know exactly what his involvement with Indian spirituality is, but he kicked me off a GAT one time because they were going to do some filming for some documentary on mysticism in Varanasi. And so he has some connection with mysticism somehow. Russell Brand obviously does as well. I'm not sure too. I know some of the names I looked at, they had quite a few children. I'm not sure if that's true of Morgan Freeman. I don't know the history of some of these people. Angelina Jolie, Marilyn Monroe, Anupama. She's a banker actually. But in a way, a lot like Angelina Jolie and Marilyn, really quite beautiful and bountiful sort of a woman. Naomi as well to a certain degree. Probably actually a lot like Marilyn Monroe in a lot of ways. Obviously a cop is going to be a protector. Sean Lethbridge is also a protector. He's also transgender, actually. And Tin Truck, he's what is he? Not sure what he is. I think he might be mafia, but he is kind of I think he's mafia, but I think he's also kind of a protector of his community and a protector of his space. You won't find him online. But he's kind of a protector of his space. He was in the Olympics and a few little things like that, but I think anyway, so his good name got used. He's in an Eastern European country, and so I think sometimes the mafia actually can be doing good things. We get then on the fourth pada. Oh wow, we get some superpowers here, really, really powerful people. Marquis de Sade, his writing came out 4 or 5 generations after his death, actually, is when his writings got released. Very, very controversial sort of stuff. Pence, that's the politician Pence. I can't remember his first name offhand. But he's had some heart problems. He's one of these guys who gets the really big red face as well. Alex Navalny, opposition. Thomas Spence, he was opposition. This is my claim to fame in my family, Thomas Spence. He set up the Republic of Rap Portage before Canada was fully a country, and so he was kind of a very controversial figure. Well, when he set up the Republic, he was kind of a prince of Canada, parts of Canada at a point, I guess. King Quincy Hong, that I can't pronounce, probably a lot like a Gaddafi figure. I'm not sure if that was the king. He was one of the emperors of China. I'm not sure if he's the one that brought unified China, but it might be interesting if he was, because that's what Gaddafi was kind of doing in Africa, unifying Africa. Now he's kind of an interesting character because, well, he was Muslim and so he was more associated with a lot of the Arab states and the Muslim countries, Muslim parts of Africa. But at some point he kind of got fed up with, in his own, his exact words, but kind of his own words, he kind of said, like, I'm done dealing with these Arab Muslim countries, and now we're going to become part of Black Africa. And so then he went down all through Africa, and he was really unifying the African states and doing a lot of great work. Eric Prince, he was the founder of Blackwater. And it's kind of funny that we get these there's a lot of very controversial sort of people like Alexei Navalny, Eric Prince, Gaddafi. A lot of these people are very sort of similar. They're very controversial kind of opposition figures in a sense. So that's kind of interesting. It's someone like Miles Davis, the trumpet player. Again, I didn't list, maybe he has a good birth time actually. Maybe. But we can kind of see that swelling, like he seems like a big guy. he was a trumpet player, and the trumpet, it's a lot of, can you say? You sometimes get the swelling in the mouth and swelling the lips, those pursed lips. I would imagine, now he's pretty black, right? Like it's kind of hard to see reddish in him. But I imagine he does get quite a red face when he's playing trumpet. I don't know this cop. We talked career stuff, and the career wasn't going very good. So I'm not sure. Here you get Eric Prince of Blackwater. And again, some of these, like so many of these, I don't know how correct their things are, but we can see Eric Prince. This is Sun and Rohini. And so we see a lot of that reddish in his face. And the mercenaries, I'm not really sure why there's so many kind of mercenary sort of people and quite violent people involved in this. I think Eric Prince might be involved as much as, because Rohini is also, it's this water, so it's some waterways as well. So there can be some shipping stuff, I think, comes out through Rohini. And Eric Prince, he actually, we'll look at him further down because he's got both Sun and Mercury in Rohini. And he hasn't had a Sun period yet, but he's just started a Mercury period, 2015, I think it was. And I think his Mercury in the Rohini period will be a lot with arms trafficking. I think that's mostly what he does. Mercenary armies and stuff like that. But I think the big money is in the arms trafficking, probably. And so there'll be more of that. And that was, who else had that? Where are they? Oh, I'm looking now. That was Mercury stuff. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and just talk about Mercury, because some other people had Mercury in Rohini in the second house, like Eric Prince. And let me skip down to that here quickly. Yeah, Ho Chi Minh. He was the leader of Vietnam, president, prime minister. He was both at some point. But you can see, if we look at the charts, it's that Mercury and Rohini in the second house, but it rules the sixth house. And so that's, I think, both of these guys making a lot of money off war, off imbalance, even off debts, probably off weapons sales and things like this, anything to do with war. And so that seems like a pretty clear indication that Mercury Rohini in second.
He's good though. Like this is like the chart of someone who's trying to help, right? When I look at it,
It's a chart of someone who what?
Like he means well. Like he's acting for the greater good is what it looks like when I look at this chart.
Well, to a certain degree, yes.
Ravana,
But he also has Jupiter debilitated. And when Jupiter is debilitated in a chart, they usually don't have very good morals
why is it debilitated?
in Capricorn.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah, Jupiter wants to have this sort of broad vision, and when he's in Capricorn, he's quite restrained by the systems in a sense.
Right.
Structures.
There's a lack of emotional awareness in a way, or emotional, like we were talking about yesterday, that emotional value of things.
Yeah, well, there's that, yeah. It's like there's well, a lot of times they're sort of atheistic as well with Jupiter, because they just don't have that broad overall vision. There's not a lot of fat on the system. They try to keep everything quite trimmed down. And in a way, that's what religion is. It's a little extra fat in the system. It seems like it's useless. And it's even today, we don't like fat. And it seems like, oh, fat, get rid of that. But actually, fat is really healthy. You need that layer of fat to protect you and defend you and all of those things. He died. He died in 69. The Americans started to show up in 65 in Vietnam. And he was working, yeah, you get this sort of sense of people working for a lot of unity. And maybe that's the Venusian aspect here, but he was really trying to unify North and South Vietnam. Now we talk about whether or not he's working for the general good here. Well, Jupiter's debilitated, so moral standing is a little bit low. His ninth house has Ketu in it, and Ketu's often, well, it can be spiritual, but it's often kind of a-religious. And so he's got the Jupiter debilitation plus the ninth house sort of, we can kind of say debilitation with Ketu there.
Mm.
So yeah, his beliefs aren't all that great either.
He was on the communist side, I think, right?
Yeah, he was on the communist side. As a person, his personal identity, so he's got his ascendant in Kritika, which is that first pada of Kritika. And so he was a big commander in chief. But then his Mars, the ruler of his ascendant, goes into 8th house, which is in its own house, Scorpio. And so he's very, very powerful commander in chief and all of that sort of stuff. But that's 8th house, all that sort of death and dying gets associated with his personality. Shocks, upsets, catastrophes, all of these things get associated with him and who he is. And so it's really, his chart is all geared, I would say, almost towards personal wealth and personal enrichment of the 2nd house. Growth of his own family, his own lineage, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so quite materialistic actually. Yeah.
And then Saturn in Leo too. So even there, he'll be really like focused on his family and his own legacy.
Yeah, and that can be a little bit cruel when Saturn's in Leo as well. Bit of a cruel placement, there's a harshness there. And so, yeah, I don't know if he was a very nice guy.
Yeah, no, I can see that now. Thank you for exploring that with me.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So we get this, we'll kind of look at this guy's chart as well then, in comparison, because we get both Sun and Mercury. I think just Sun and Rohini? No, it's Kritika. But anyways, you get both Sun and Mercury up there in the 2nd house, and so getting wealthy from this sort of stuff. Again, there was no birth time available for this guy. I just kind of figured something out and put something together. It probably needs more work. We can look at it and figure out. And by all means, if any of you guys ever doing any research and find you just don't agree with this chart belonging to the man, for example, let me know. We'll talk about it. I love those kind of conversations. And so this is kind of what I came up for him. He hasn't really had a major Rohini period until just now. He's about halfway through his Mercury Mahadasha. And I think it's quite lucrative. I couldn't really find a whole lot about what he's up to these days. It's kind of funny. Wikipedia is very political, actually. Wikipedia is not the greatest source for learning about people. And I'm really noticing now that I'm studying a lot of people, because in 2016, Eric Prince kind of got involved with the Trump campaign somehow. And so it's really funny. Anybody who got involved with the Trump campaign just gets trashed on Wikipedia. They're just the devil on Wikipedia. It's really funny, actually. If it wasn't so sad, it would be funny, I guess. And so this guy kind of helped out with that. And so they just kind of trashed his name since then. But again, I think by his Mercury, like with a Warren, and this is kind of tricky. It's hard to say what he would be up to, because the Democrats don't really like him, and they're in charge of the war in Ukraine right now. And well, everybody knows the Democrats are doing everything they can to make sure their own guys are making the money off that. Hunter Biden and that Pelosi's children, they're just cleaning up like crazy. So I don't know how much involvement they would have allowed to have this Eric Prince, right? Because he's a Trump guy. And so I'm not sure if he was getting quite involved with the insurgencies in Africa. And so he was a very secretive guy, involved with CIA at some point and all kinds of dodgy stuff. Now, we could ask the same question, is his heart in the right place? And I would almost be a little bit more tempted to say yes in this case. To a certain degree, but he's got the Saturn debilitated in his personality, which quite brings him down. It's interesting to see he's got the same Mars here as well. Quite interesting to see the similarities. This guy is the opposite of communist, however. But I also find that funny. You get these Americans are funny people. They're like, oh, down with communism suck, kill all the commies. And then it's like, you live on a farm with 6 families and share everything, right? So anyways, I don't care. So he's kind of like that, right? Call me suck, but he's also quite, for his team, his camp, they kind of all take care of each other. So, so yeah. Yeah, I don't know. He's probably didn't make as much money. You got Jupiter and Ketu in the 6th house. A lot more war involvement with this fellow, certainly. Yeah, kind of on a sense, just numb from war and imbalance, and it doesn't even really affect him anymore. I want to see what this guy's 6th house is like. Yeah, so he would still get that effect. And feel that war would be quite harsh. What do they just do? But this guy is basically, he would be numb from war. He's one of those guys you just kind of walk through while bombs are blowing up and people are shooting past his head and this kind of stuff.
Can you tell that?
Yeah, well, that would be the Ketu. The Ketu in 6th house kind of makes them numb to these kinds of things, numb to the imbalances. And then in like someone like Hitler's chart, I think his Ketu is in Mula there, but they talk about this idea of like total war. I've got Ketu also in my 6th house, and it's like, yeah, I'm not really very affected by imbalance. Like, I go and, anyways, when I'm traveling and going through the cities, I end up hanging out with like homeless people and drug addicted people on the streets because, well, normal people don't go to parks anymore in the West. It's just a place for homeless people to hang out and strange astrologers from odd lands. And so, so this Ketu, I can kind of be in all those imbalanced situations and it doesn't affect me. It doesn't bother me. And so he's even more so because his Ketu is with Jupiter. And it expands all that imbalance and all of that sort of stuff as well. And probably like, he's the kind of guy, it's like, oh, there's a little dispute going on between these 2 tribes. Let's go and make it worse and sell them all weapons. So that kind of thing. I found it interesting in his chart because he's got some Kritika, does he? No, he doesn't. Okay, never mind. But he's got 7 children and a nice wife. He's been married for a long time. He's probably always working and she's probably always spending his money, so it works out well for both of them. Yeah, so here was Allen Ginsberg. Try to read a little bit more about him. I try to write, I'm still not sure how to fully organize these write-ups. I'm not happy with the way I did this. I'm going to change it probably. Because what happens is this becomes one big block. And anytime I edit, then I get this crossovers and overlaps. Che Guevara, again, very similar to the rest of these guys. Again, I use the time they gave in his autobiography, but if you start to think that he's a lot like the other 2, maybe he also has Aries ascendant, and so maybe he's changed. But if we look at him, well, he's got kind of funny eyes, so it's hard to tell. Venus in the second house giving him glasses, that sort of thing. The eye problems coming through Mars and well, second and the 12th houses. But then if we use that same rationale, we'd expect Che Guevara to also be wearing glasses. I don't know if he did or not, but he died fairly early also. Assassinated actually. And so yeah, when we're looking at his chart, you might start to think that he also might have Aries ascendant. Because he was also spreading revolution and that sort of thing. But we look at someone like Ho Chi Minh, he's got that kind of long, narrow, skinnier face. Whereas someone like Che Guevara, he looks like he's got this rounder kind of face. And now there's even arguments. So mostly they say he was born May 14th. But actually I read some places say actually was born June 14th. So I don't know what to do with some of these charts. I talked about Ginsburg, Beat Generation. Dante Alighieri, he wrote, I don't know if you read his book, probably has a bunch of them, but only one's really famous. The Divine Comedy, that what it's called? Anyways, it was all about the circles of hell. Great book. Yeah, really kind of a great book. Really, really difficult for us to read these days. If you're going to read that, be ready to study history because it's all historical names and it's all like that kind of thing. And we get these kind of, well, Robbie Knievel, he's not taking these military chances, but he was also a daredevil. He liked to take a lot of risk. That kind of thing, motorbike risk, I think, for the most part. He's the son of Evil Knievel. Kind of took over for that, a lineage thing. And I'm not exactly sure how he fits into Rohini, but anyways, he's got it there. There you go. We got Karl Marx and Robespierre, both political philosophers, basically, economic philosophers in a sense. Look at that picture of Karl Marx. I never saw him in full color like that. It's like, wow, there's the papa, right? There's father. That's a pretty good example of that. Seem to see a lot of really high foreheads in Rohini. Not quite bald, but like you see both these guys have that sort of receding hairline and high forehead. It's really tough sometimes. You get these paintings of these people. It's hard to tell if that's actually what they look like. A lot of these paintings that we get of these kings and queens, this was their Tinder, man. This was their Snapchat or whatever. They hire the painter to come in and do a nice painting of me. And especially it was more like this with the women, but do the nice painting of me and I'll send it around to all these other kings. And one of them will want to marry me because I have this beautiful painting. And so, well, it's the same as Tinder. They're doctoring their pictures, man. That's not really what they look like. They're trying to make themselves look, for the men, probably look more stately than they really were, or more serious, or more like that. And so it's hard to really tell if they actually look like these paintings. But yeah, Tinder just took a little bit longer in those days. But they're still doing it. Like it was just the same thing we're doing today, right? I think it was the same area they first started to paint the grouchy cat sort of thing as well. So that was the Renaissance when painting and art and got big. And well, what do we use most of it for? For dating, for meeting people, for selling things. And so it was the same sort of idea then. I don't know if that's supposed to be our Prince or Che Guevara, but we see a lot of really wandering people as well. I'll bet you that's our Prince. Well, there's Prince William. What else do we got there? No, I find with most of the royalties, their birth times are sharp, they're exact, they're working, their charts are working really well. And so we can kind of rely on that. We see again that sort of high forehead. And when it comes to the royalty, I remember reading something, a long time ago. And they were talking about a lot of these really, the royalty in the world. And this kind of high forehead, and almost sometimes they talked about almost being a little bit like unusually high forehead. And we'll see that with not Dante. No. Anyways, it was another guy from about the 17th century, kind of wore this. It made, I don't know if his forehead was actually that high or if it's the hat he wore, but they were kind of trying to do that. So you see that a lot, quite prominent foreheads. Iconic father figures. There's a few of those, some serial killers. Anne Hesh, I don't know much about these people. As far as I know, she's just famous for being the girlfriend of Ellen. And well, I was expecting her to be a butchy broad, and I pulled up this picture of her and I was like, oh wow, good job, Ellen. She's quite beautiful woman. But again, the kind of rosy cheeks and quite Rohini in her ways, right? Very she looks very fertile, right? Kind of thing. There was a couple earthquakes with Rohini placements, earthquakes and volcanoes especially is caused by some swelling of the place. And earthquakes there's different reasons for earthquakes, but some of that is also because of some swelling between the plates until something breaks sway. There we get the big emperor of China, all red face, the big sort of thing going on like that. Katie Bowman. This is funny. I pulled up this picture and I was like, isn't there a picture where she looks like she's over 18 years old? Because I do have some limits on here, and so I don't want to do charts of people who are under 18 kind of thing. And I don't want to be publicizing their pictures and stuff. But so here's this, like, she's, to me, looks like the perfect Rohini girl. And she's this sweet little girl. And she's a PhD in computing. And big part of the reason we have a picture of a black hole. And so she's quite intelligent as well. That way. Rohit Renu, she was a friend of a friend, so I'm not actually sure, but it was a PhD, kind of highly educated person. Yeah, there's such a, God, I'm looking at these names and it's like, that's really one of the big challenges of this research project. It's like, what brings these people together? I could think a little bit George Orwell and Katie Bowman, maybe something like science fiction kind of thing, bringing them together to a certain degree. Guidia, maybe. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think like the first thing that came up for me, or from looking at the names, it's trying to help the whole of everybody at the same time. Like Marx is there, Ho Chi Minh is there. Those are big communist-oriented people. Orwell as well, like the way he wrote was looking at like the big communist situation, and just Angelina Jolie and Marilyn Monroe. I'm not sure about Monroe, but I feel like they supported poor kids in poor countries and things like that. And communism is really linked about trying to help everyone at the end of the day. So it looks like Rohini's trying to nurture everyone and everything. I
Yeah,
think the trend between these people.
very much is. And while the moon and Cancer is kind of that communism, that's the commune, the communal sort of group. And so, yeah, there definitely is that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, it's kind of just looking at like Mercury in 10th house here, trying to figure, I don't know if you know who Mick Foley was, that really gore wrestler. He was that guy, he would like, they body slam him onto tacks and nails and barbed wire cutting up his face. And he really like the dirt and grime, like he would just take the punishment and get the paycheck, kind of thing. So he was one of these really hardcore kind of guys. And so I could kind of see like Mick Foley and even the King, Quincy Hong. I think he was the guy who unified China, brought a bunch of warring states together in a sense. And Mick Foley, I'm not sure, again, he was a wrestler, so I'm not sure how that worked.
Yeah, spot on with King Shui Hang was the founder of the Qin dynasty and the first emperor of a unified China.
Yeah, okay, there was a, I watched one of those Chinese serials during lockdown, all about him. It was like 20 episodes or something like that about the Qin.
He's got the terracotta army built. He's the one who put that together.
Okay, okay, cool. Yeah. So unified China and as a way kind of communized it as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. We had a lot of engineering and a lot of public works and things like that. Was really like partially war, but partially diplomacy as he got his unification done. It was a great, that little Chinese thing I watched during lockdown. It was a great thing on his life. Really, really kind of cool story. YouTube special. Here we can see a little bit of similarities. Meryl Streep and Molly Sims. Again, those cheeks, those kind of bright red round cheeks. I think even Tucker Carlson has them a bit. No, not so much. He's really really critical. When I see Tucker, it's like there's a critical guy right there. But of course, he's always got a lot of things. That Eddie Gallagher, I don't know if you remember his picture. He actually looks a lot like Tucker Carlson. Natalia, interesting to see her here. Because she's involved with the same stuff that Guida, import, export clothing, doing a lot of festivals and things like that, selling stuff. I think Guida has a little shop. I don't know if Natalia did or not. I know someone like Leon Gaumont. He was an industrialist, but he was also like those early times of motion pictures. A lot of those early actors, Charlie Chaplin, who was the other guy? We just looked at his chart yesterday. Anyways, a lot of the actors and stuff like that. Like, wow, the early Hollywood was like all those guys were dating 13-year-old girls. It was like, it was just the thing to do, really. But at the same time, they were like someone, I think it was Charlie Chaplin, or maybe it was the other guy. I want to Baker, Parker. Anyways, I think it was Charlie Chaplin that actually he got quite a few of these young girls pregnant, knocked them up, and but also took care of them. Right, he gave them money and got them a house and got them a car and made sure they were taken care of. And so they were these kind of father figures, both to their wives and to their children. Apparently, I don't like Rob Ford very much. Failed at pretty much everything he tried to do to somehow managed to get elected mayor of Toronto. Despite all these addictions and addictive tendencies, drunken scandals, domestic disputes. He was just a football guy, just basically a football coach that somehow became a mayor. Nobody's quite sure how, but I guess sports is big in Canada. So rah, rah, let's go, my team. And that's all it took. So
I used to work construction, or not construction, but anyways, in the field of construction. And yeah, like I don't like, I'm not big on small talk, but every time I'd show up to any one of these construction fields, or like it'd be like, oh, like what hockey game happened last night, and I just Google that, and it's so easy to talk hockey, like, oh, like, like the Leafs are due for a big year this year, like they got some new signings, so it's easy to talk like that. So it's easy to play the game in Canada, I feel, with hockey. So
yeah, and so Rob Ford could, yeah, do the
yeah.
do the talk.
And the other thing too, I guess that's fun and interesting, or like someone that drinks or does cocaine, you'll kind of trust them more because you know they're not hiding anything, like they're just upfront with everything. They just like have this ability to be like, yeah, it's regular, I guess, I don't know.
I think it was like what was that band name? It was Anthrax. Hey, it was one of those heavy metal bands, and they started the song off with "Never Trust a Junkie." And Rob Ford would be that, I'm pretty sure. So, but he was like the guy next door. He was like the buddy,
Exactly.
like that sort of thing.
The
Yeah.
neighbor you can count on kind of thing. Like he's just always there because he's always high, he's just waiting at home. He's not out doing anything. He's just always there.
Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah. And happy, and he was probably like smiling,
Yeah.
joking, and all of
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what was that? Oh, Jupiter must have been transiting Rohini when you had the big stock crash in 1929. This is kind of tricky because again, we think of the swelling, we think of the growth, and so you'd want to think that Jupiter and Rohini would be this almost overexpansion or overgrowth. And so maybe that's what also caused a lot of stock market crashes, right? You kind of get these stock bubbles and everything is overvalued, basically. And then there's a correction and things come back to what they're really worth. And so the price of the stock market drops. Like that. So someone like Thomas Edison. No, well, he's very old when they took this picture. He's obviously just posing for it. And from what I've read, he didn't actually do a lot of research himself. What he had a whole bunch of people working for him. And he was just running like, we want this, just try that, try that, try that, try that. And they're just like trying every different thing that they could. It was a little bit chaos, but once in a while they would discover something. They would find some new useful thing. So that was kind of Thomas Edison. Ursula Le Guin must be Margot Hemingway and Ursula Le Guin. Margot Hemingway again, kind of perfect woman in a way. She was a model. I think she was Ernest Hemingway's granddaughter. I've got some of his daughter. I got his daughter, and I've got his grandchildren here a little bit. I don't know why. Just names you find and make the chart. Ursula Le Guin, she wrote some science fiction as well. That was her main genre. But what she was doing was kind of combining. She was bringing in a lot of Eastern philosophy into these science fiction stories. She was required reading for a East Meets West course out of Athabasca University quite a few years ago. Here we get in again, like someone like Rumi. I have no idea if his chart is correct. I haven't gone into it. This was the guy I said with the hat that made the forehead look even bigger. It was Rumi. You can see Dante and Rumi. They're both great saints, great poets, great writers. A little bit, you could say, opposite spectrum, though, because Rumi was writing this beautiful love poetry to God, in a sense, and Dante was writing this beautiful poetry to the devil, right? That's the last circle of hell, is you get down to actually, the depths of hell were frozen when you get down to the bottom of it. And so then he actually climbed up the ice wall to get out of hell again. Something like that. Jamie Saleh, there was a couple of these figures as well. Spike Milligan, Anton LaVey. Oh wow, what a crowd. So you get these. Jamie Saleh, she was a figure skater, but she won, I don't know if she won gold, but she did well at the Olympics anyways. And then what she did for quite a few years was some kind of like that Stars on Ice. I don't know if they still have something like that in the winter, but it's like a skating circus in a way. I don't know how to describe it. So she was a part of that for quite a few years. And you can see she's also got those red cheeks and this sort of thing, very Rohini. Spike Milligan, he was a comedian. And Anton LaVey was a Satanist. Now, the way I see all these three people sort of coming together, they all seem to be like, in a way, they're a sideshow. In a sense, right? People come to kind of gawk at them in a way. She from skating, him from his comedy, and him because he's a crazy Satanist. Alexander Graham Bell, he was a great father figure. He took care of a lot of kids. I think he had a lot of his own children, but did a lot of work to take care of children. He did some work. I think he was working with deaf kids, actually. And that might even be how the telephone came about, was through working with deaf kids somehow. Well, yeah, that's a.
Rohini typically wants to take on like a support role, from what I understand, right? Or
Well, it wants to be the protector in a way, but support and protect and help grow. So it wants to fertilize, it wants to nourish, it wants to, yeah, it wants to see that growth. It wants to feed that growth.
right.
So. And that was Henry Ford's son, growth of the business. I don't know how I don't know how Henry Ford II did in his business. I would expect pretty good, but to see his name beside the Black Thursday stock crash, maybe he also grew beyond capacity and then had some troubles because of that. See, in a way, this is Jupiter in Taurus. And so there is a bit of animosity between Venus and Jupiter. So like that. Carol Hemingway. So I think that's the mother and the other was the daughter. Albert Fish was actually a serial killer. Quite a few serial killers had this. Botanist and collector Lana Wachowski. I'm not sure if she's a lesbian or if she's transgender. There's quite a bit of that again. There's quite a bit of lesbian, quite a bit of transgender with Rohini placements. I'm not exactly lesbian. I can maybe sort of see, but I'm not sure why it went transgender as much as it did. A lot of serial killers as well. You got Gacy has Jupiter and Rohini. Albert Fish. There was another one, another guy, another serial killer up ahead that we passed. And this is kind of interesting. This guy's doing the clown thing. John Wayne Gacy was the clown killer, I guess. And so he was also kind of like taking care and working with the children and this kind of thing. I think Albert Fish's crimes were also against children. Yeah, like that. Stephen Hawking, that's a really young picture of him, an really old shot of Stephen Hawking. Yeah, again, I'm not really sure how the Rohini fits into his life. Someone like Samuel Beckett wrote a lot about death and suffering and this sort of thing. And Sam Walton, he's the guy that started Walmart. He's the Walmart. I don't know if he's the guy that started it. Maybe he's the son of the guy who started it. It was actually a good start.
I think it's him, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, let me check.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Sam.
Okay, so it's a Sam Walton. So these guys started Walmart. And so there's a few CEOs sort of have this. And one of the big things about, like one of the things we don't think about bosses, for example, like I used to work for this, it was a construction company, but it was basically a farmer's farmers running it. And so Nick's big concern, like Nick kind of looked at all of us like children. Like we has to take care of us to a certain degree. And well, the way he took care of us was make sure that we had a job and we kept working and we were making as much money as we can. And we worked out of town a lot of times too. So he had to arrange hotel and food and all of that. He was the big papa figure. And so a lot of times that's what these bosses are. They're kind of taking care of their children. They have responsibilities to these people who are working under them. So that sort of thing. Or Jupiter, Rohini. Here we get more like Bernadine Dorn. She's like, I don't know, the wiki calls her like a communist insurgent or something like that, an American communist extremist, something along that line. And so she's married to the Bill Dorn, who is the kind of leader of Project Underground or something like that. And well, if you want to name your gang Project Underground, people are probably going to think that you're up to something. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this woman's name. I will, I guess. Unag Shanley, but she was Princess Diana's acupuncturist. She was using gold acupuncture needles and things like this. Quite a mystic sort of a person. Howard Schultz, I think that's the guy who started, Starbucks. He's a Starbucks guy. So we see a few sort of CEOs here running big companies. Again, there might need to be some work done on their birth times. They could be out again. We find Katie Bowman again. Here we find quite a lineup with Jupiter in the 10th house, Rohini. So Katie Bowman, Master of Computing, Richard Fennion, Nobel Prize in Physics. Who's this other guy? Arthur Schlesinger. He wasn't a scientist, but he was a social scientist, I guess is what he was. He was one of these commentators, left-wing commentators back in the day. It was early. What's where she going? Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of quite a grouping a name. Nikita Khrushchev. Politics. Arthur Schlesinger was involved in politics. Betty Ford went to jail. Foley went to jail. Dottie is like a supermodel kind of person. And some shots of Muhammad Ali, some fighters. Indira Gandhi. She was assassinated. I notice we're kind of coming less charts. If there's any of these charts that you really want to look into, I can pull it up on the other thing there. Oh, here we go. And George Floyd, he didn't have a good birth time, but that's a kind of quick rectification to put his Jupiter in the 12th house. And then he goes in there like Oscar Romeo was, in a sense, he was working for a lot of like the freedom of against repression and I think some of the sort of racist against indigenous people that was going on at the time. We got what's her name? Saint Therese de Avila as well. She gets some saintly. Candace Owens is kind of interesting because I don't know much about her, but I get this sort of sense that she puts herself off as being quite saintly in a sense as well. Kind of a little bit of a savior for the Black people in a way. Come follow me. Sort of I'll lead you to the promised land, I guess, sort of in a sense. She's tricky to find pictures of her because, well, I'd seen a couple things of her online, maybe watch something sometime. And most of her production, she looks really, really beautiful woman. But if you see kind of on makeup pictures of her, she's kind of looks like a raging bitch. Uh, so then we get guys like Buzz Aldrin, one of the first ones to the moon, Rutherford Hayes, who was a president of the US. Some of these early presidents, I think, probably also considered themselves more like fathers of their people. I don't know if modern presidents feel that way anymore. Rembrandt, Gustav Klimt. And I get this sense in Rohini, like Gustav Klimt used a lot of gold, but there was a lot of red. Like his use of red was kind of what made his painting sort of sexual, sensual. These kind of like little red points that kind of came up. You don't get so much of that with Rembrandt stuff. But Rohini is a little bit like a flower. Paul Gauguin. Who is this? This is Venus Rohini. So yeah, quite a few great artists having this Venus Rohini. Also, a lot of them working with a lot of young women as well. Their models would be probably quite young girls doing their modeling. Paul Gauguin. For a lot of years, I think people thought my travels, I was doing what Paul Gauguin was up to at his travels. He basically went to live with Tahiti and he was sleeping with all the young girls he could and just kind of enjoying that kind of exotic lifestyle. Paul Gauguin, there was someone else staying in Tahiti with him. I can't remember who that was. King Henry VIII is interesting. He was that bloody king that beheaded a bunch of his ex-wives and caused a schism in the church so he could get a divorce. There's something in Rohini, I get the sense especially of like again, it's like that top part of a flower in a sense. It's the head in a way, I think the forehead. And so you had a lot of the beheadings through Henry VIII, but he was trying to have a son. And he kept having these daughters, or his sons kept dying, his kids kept dying. And then eventually it was his daughters who ended up taking over for him. First Queen Bloody Mary, and she killed a bunch of people. And then Queen Elizabeth I. And that's actually, she's kind of credited with, I guess here you get the good daughter and the bad daughter sort of thing, but Queen Elizabeth is credited, I guess, being the good daughter and had a little bit more, because it was a big war between I don't even know if it was really the Catholics and the Protestants, because King Henry kind of was doing his own thing. But anyways, there was a war between these religions at the time, and Queen Elizabeth said, that's all right, you're all forgiven, let's move on. I wrote quite a bit on that you can read. There we go, more of Venus Rohini. There was a few people with Nobel Prizes in physics with Rohini placements. Venus or Jupiter seems to be quite a wise sort of placement. Yeah, I read what these people did, and it doesn't make any sense to me. I still don't know what the heck that means. A precision in terms of the magnetic, well, I should probably say movement of the electron. And I'm like, again, I'm trying to relate this sort of stuff to Rohini. Now, in some of these academics, they're going to be mentors, they're going to be professors, and so in that way, they're going to have these sort of, they're raising children, raising up who's coming behind them. But we can see also, I've got Shakespeare's name here as well, with a little note saying, oh, should this be in the 10th house? But Salman Rushdie, I've got a question by his name as well. There we go, there's King Henry. Clive Wearing was interesting. He kind of lost his, I think that's the fellow that lost his memory. Let me see. Yeah, he was into music and lost his memory. I think there is something with Rohini placements as well, that I don't know if they're so much playing music, but I think they can be quite sensitive to those things.
Music?
Music, yeah. I think maybe it's a sensitivity for listening or hearing the music more than playing it. I don't know how many of these people who pastorally play music. But the moon is that sensitivity. It's like that. And if you think of that calm pool of water, any little ripple gets felt. Anything that touches it sort of gets felt in a sense. And that might also relate with some of these physicists who are really working on these micro levels of existence. And so any tiniest little change, they're registering that in a sense. Yeah, James Ensor, he did a lot of it, and that's what also interesting. There was a serial killer there who was the clown, and James Ensor painted a lot of kind of clown faces, kind of commentary against the ruling elite, I guess you could say, in a sense, and the bourgeois. He kind of poked a lot of fun at them through his art. But there is also something, and it's that swelling, it's that redness maybe, but there seems to be a lot of clown metaphors that also come up in Rohini. The big red nose, the big red cheeks, maybe. I'm not really sure why these things are coming up in Rohini. Also, maybe dealing with children, but James's art wasn't for children really. And so this kind of thing comes up. Get Joan Collins. Again, some of these people I'm not really too sure about them. Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter S. and someone like Knievel have very, very similar faces, facial structures. Almost a rectangular face in a sense. And so someone like Joan Collins, I don't know much about her, but she was an old actress. Some more killers, the ice pick killer. Again, Rohini has something to do with water. I think also ice is there as well. As we'll scroll down, there's some hockey players. I think, like I said, Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux both have placements in Rohini. The great one, and I don't know, the great one, swimmer, diver, this kind of thing. So the water, ice connection. St. John of the Cross, I'm not so sure. God sustains every soul and dwells in it. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. Not so much God sustaining every soul, but the father figure of Rohini trying to sustain people. In a sense. Mary Pickford. Like there's so many of the women that have Rohini placements. They're so beautiful. They're so lovely. I'm kind of famous for that. Thoreau and Kant. And just philosophers. Mary Pickford, I'm not sure why she would be in the same category as Kant and David Thoreau, but again, kind of taking care of those who come after them in a sense. Henry David Thoreau was kind of a funny character. He's very famous for this book called Walden's Pond, where he like went and lived out in the nature jungle with the savages. His mother delivered his lunch to him every day. Yeah, it was like he was camping in his backyard or something like that. So I don't know about some of these characters. Again, I would like to look into someone like Kant, for example, and really dive into his philosophy and find out why or how it relates to Rohini. And kind of diving into the stuff with philosophers can be quite rewarding. Carla Homolka, she was another serial killer or the girlfriend of a serial killer. I can't remember which it was. David Carpenter, another serial killer. Well, it's quite amazing how many of these guys are serial killers have Rohini placements as well.
It might be like that's the overindulgent part of Rohini, maybe, where they just want more and more and more of it, and um,
It might be that swelling of desire.
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so those sorts of things, yeah. Um, like I think of Trent Reznor's music. It's very kind of has a swollen quality to it somehow. Like the sound will feel like it kind of swells and fills a room. Um, like that, or fills the theater. And I think Gustav Klimt also, that swelling desire, um, that kind of thing. Paula Yates, she's interesting. Her and her mother both, or is it her and her daughter? Something like that. They're her and her mother, or her and her daughter. It was a mother and daughter thing. And the mother was kind of a heroin addict and died very, very early. And then the daughter basically followed in those same footsteps. Which is quite too bad. So then we get the Iceman, again, that kind of watery sort of, that connection with the water. Jeremy Corbyn, I don't know what to say about this guy. He was beloved labor leader in the UK for years. And then, I don't know, sometimes I think all this like racism stuff almost started with some of these Jewish organizations that go around basically calling everybody's anti-Semitic. And so Jeremy Corbyn got caught in all of that sort of crossfire as well. Somehow, I don't know much about it, but you get this. It's like, I don't know, you say anything bad about a Jewish person and you're anti-Semitic. You say anything bad about a black person and you're racist. And there's organizations out there to really like make sure that nobody says anything bad. And it's quite ridiculous. So he got quite caught up in that sort of thing.
But we can say that white people ruin the world, though, right?
Oh,
That
white
was
people,
allowed.
yeah, white people ruin the world. They're rednecks, they're racists, oh man, it's just kill white people. Yeah, you can say anything about us. We're fair game. And could you imagine if we started an organization that started calling everybody racist who said something like,
Exactly.
oh
Yeah,
God,
two white dudes. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's like you can't say that. But it's coming to that, and that's what society, like that's why it's coming to war now. Because more and more the differences are getting highlighted, more and more people are becoming separated from each other. I find it interesting. I'm from India or whatever, I don't know. I never really connected much with the American blacks. I just don't know any of them, right? Never met any. They don't travel to India, or very, very rare. Met a few friends here and there, but just recently, quite a few American blacks traveled to Guatemala, for example. And so I did some charts for some American black people. And it was really interesting because there was another black woman, African black woman in Guatemala I was kind of hanging out with. And it was really interesting because all the American blacks, all our conversation was just about racism or wokeism, right? And it was actually quite boring. It's a very boring topic for me. And the African black woman, well, you would hardly even know she was black in a way, the way she acted, the way she was, the way she, I don't know, you just hardly even notice. But the American blacks seem to somehow really highlight that. And here we go, Bill Cosby, one of the early black actors in Hollywood and all of that. The iconic father figure, but fallen. And that does seem to be a theme. Iconic father figure, fallen. Right? Iconic protector, fallen. And so that sort of swelling desire. Here we see Diane Haggerty. She was the wife of the other Lavoie Satanist guy. And I got to look into her because I think I know her as an old lady. So I'm like, is that Diane? Is that the same Diane? Is this Diane? So I gotta check that out and find out if I know her or not. But you get this kind of thing. Malcolm X, few revolutionaries. Malcolm X is here. We saw Che Guevara there before. Again, the communist sort of thing, just taking care of the people. Very, very strong sort of thing. Jessica Simpson. Oh, all these beautiful women with these beautiful breasts. Oh, Rohini's just lovely. They're just bursting out of their wardrobe. Count Zeppelin. I think this is the guy who made the Zeppelin. So you can see how that's, well, not just, I guess that's the thing. It's not just swelling. It's swelling and then bursting. And so that's the falling, and that's the, so they're really, I think that bursting, as we look into it, it seems the bursting is just as important as the swelling in this case. And I think it's what a lot of the revolutionaries, maybe like, I hate to burst your bubble, but in a way, kind of these things come in. Bob Dylan, I'm going to open his chart because I'm not sure if his chart is correct. I think I had his chart further up there, but so here we're looking at Venus. Oh, you can't see that, can you? There, now you can see it. So, I'm not sure where I got this chart for the time of Bob Dylan. But here we see all these Rohini placements in his 10th house. And so I'm not sure if that's him making it to the top. But I also have, I just looked at it when I was looking at his chart today. I thought, geez, I wonder if that sun and all that Rohini is an ascendant, actually. But I think again, with someone like Bob Dylan, it's that swelling of the crowd. 10th house is his workspace. And that's that swelling of the sound, that swelling of excitement, that swelling of it's just that excitement of like you're growing in the charts in a way. That kind of thing. So, uh-oh. Yeah, here's Paul Gauguin. Green, what did she do? She did something. Oh, Mike Tyson also with swelling. He's a fighter, so like, and I think a lot of the fighters as well, they deal with a lot of swelling type injuries, right? There's Rembrandt's self-portrait. You can see a little bit actually. Paul Gauguin and Rembrandt, there's a little bit of similarity in the way they look, and certainly not in their art, very not much similarity in their style, but there is a bit of a similarity in the look that they both have to a certain degree. Get Molly Sims, a couple placements in Rohini. Joe Lewis, quite a few fighters had this. You can see all that swelling and breaking face. More fighters. Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston was like a bully. He was just a brutal, he was like a, can you say, muscle for the mob. Now we got a more Conor McGregor also having this placements of Venus and Rohini. And so there's that, yeah, that they quite like that swelling. There might also be, like Conor McGregor is one of these guys. I see him on a video, like he's blah, 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 big mouth on him anyways, like you would expect on a fighter. But then there's also like, he's got these young, beautiful women, and all of them, I'm pretty sure, have fake breasts. But he's kind of surrounded with this entourage like that. I wouldn't be surprised if Sonny Liston was a bit that way, right? He was kind of a mob guy. Kind of dirty Joe Lewis, I'm not sure either, but you get that, we get some popes here now. One of the other things about Rohini is that it's also very, you can really see it here, it's very white, right? Rohini is really gives a very white complexion. You have to have a very white complexion to get the redness, the blushing. It's usually almost like the more white you are, the more pure you are, the easier it is to make you blush, the easier it is to make you embarrassed. Yeah, I caught on by just how white these two guys are. So yeah, here we go. The Saturn in the second house. You got Eugene Lamb, Pierre Ramon. I'm not sure about Oscar de la Hoya. And then you got Ma Huitenag. He's I think he's the guy that started Alibaba. But anyways, big computer guy, Chinese computer guy. Way too smart for anybody. And same thing, you get then Willis Eugene Lamb, and this rare sort of theorist turned experimentalist dealing with magnetic, and Pierre Ramon dealing with superstring theories and things like that. So again, some of these guys didn't have exact times, and this is what I came up with for them. I might need to look at it more, but it looks to me like Saturn in the second house is highly, very, very intelligent, very, very intelligent people. Dante Alighieri has placements there. Now you got Saturn in the fourth. Talk about the father figure and the protective figure. Goaltenders here, B.V. Raman, the great Vedic astrologer, has Rohini placements. Along with William Burroughs. In a very funny way, B.V. Raman and William Burroughs had similar chart. B.V. Raman he traveled all over India doing astrology, doing matching, chart matching. From what I can gather, there was a little bit of like, oh, wow, he's doing something here. But from what I was gather, he was mostly just matching the nakshatra scores and saying, yeah, you're a good match, you're not a good match, you're a good match, just from the nakshatra scores. But also, you'll notice all the research I'm doing on this project is coming from B.V. Raman, right? He tells us, first lord in the fourth house, there'll be happiness from parents, many brothers. So, and lots of landed properties. So,
when it says first lord in the fourth house, that means the ruler of the ascendant is in the fourth house, correct?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So then what happens is the personal identity gets connected very much with, well, it gets almost connected more with parental and being a protective figure, but being a teacher, very much connected with their home place, their hometown, their home country, whatever it might be, their home culture. Yeah, those kind of things when the first lord is in fourth. And so, well, when it's, what is it here now? This is Saturn, okay. So Saturn would usually give them a kind of an older home as well. These sorts of things, the first and 12th lord. So, yeah, I don't know, Martin Brodeur, I don't know, I think he did a lot of like hockey school type stuff, helping out in that kind of thing and helping the kids grow. B.V. Raman, well, I would have to call him one of my gurus, right? So he's helped others grow. William Burroughs was also similar as well. In with a lot of junkies and hard people, but he was also kind of the guy I think some of those junkies and hard people could rely on. we get Frederick Bear. We've got his chart there. We can look at in a minute. Pierre Paul Broca and Cheryl. Pierre Paul Broca, he came up before. He's he was a physician, did some research on the brain. Frederick Bear, of course, Bayer Pharmaceuticals. He's the guy that started all of that. Cheryl is also a biologist, I guess. And so she's done a lot of studies with wolves, lived with bears, kind of stuff. Yeah. We got a pretty wild bunch here, actually, kind of mixed crowd. Saturn in the sixth house, Rohini. You get Jimi Hendrix, Coco Chanel, Pope Benedict, who's basically dressed like Jimi Hendrix. And you get the other guy. Who else we got here? Oh, you got my brother. And Shankara Sharma. Shankar Sharma was definitely, he was almost maybe a Pope figure in a sense. He was the kind of like a village headman. You won't find him online. Probably find a gazillion Shankar Sharmas though. But he was a village headman, and he would come to the ashram every day, and he would always bring something for the ashram, some food, something. I think he was also basically supporting the whole ashram that I was staying at. It was his money mostly supporting it. And so, very lovely man that way. Saturn in the sixth house, though, it usually causes people to be kind of like stuck in an imbalance, really long-term debts. Problems last for a long time. Grudges and things like this will last for a long time. Can definitely vouch for that from my brother's point of view. He's had a grudge on me for about 20 years now. Service teams, technical work, working with the hands. I know Shankar Sharma, Jimi Hendrix could be considered quite technical with the way he played. The Nixon address, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. That's when Richard Nixon came out and said that the American dollar will no longer be attached to the gold standard. And so basically, through a technicality, because it used to be, I don't know, like $10 could buy an ounce of gold, and now it's like $1,000 to buy an ounce of gold. And so they talk about this great inflation. And so the Nixon address started this great swelling of inflation, basically, that Americans are really suffering with now. The world is kind of starting to suffer with that inflation. But a lot of that actually started at the time of the Nixon address. So that's kind of an interesting thing to come across. There we go. You can see some similarities. Winona Ryder and Alyssa Milano. They look quite similar. I think they both have a little bit of involvement in politics, where they should probably both just talk less. Same with Joe Biden. He should probably also talk less. And then we get the founder of Aikido. Again, I'm not 100% sure of some of these placements they have, but there's been so many fighters with Rohini placements. Some cases, I think it's a swelling of the muscles, in a sense. Someone like him, I would want to think it's this, well, we think of the fatherly figureness in a sense, and this doesn't match because the other fighters are pretty brutal and they just quite enjoy beating the hell out of someone. But Aikido was similar to Judo in a sense. Judo translates as the gentle way. And Aikido also kind of is more gentle. It doesn't really want to hurt the opponent. It doesn't want anybody to get hurt. And so
what's coming up right now for me as you're saying this, it sounds like Rohini placements want things to be swollen. So they want them to grow. And when things are swollen, it gives room for that healing or that transformation. So in a keto, is that with the wooden sticks or something like that? Is that what a keto
A
is?
keto it's all the cycles. What's his name? Steven Seagal was an Aikido person. And so it's using the opponent's energy, basically. So it's almost effortless for the Aikido practitioner. So you punch and
Right.
they pull your arm forward, step aside and pull the arm forward, and all that weight you have going forward with the punch just keeps going and you end up on your face, right? So that's kind of a keto. There would be
Good.
something there with to look at, and that use of force in a sense. And the way the forces are being moved in a
Yeah,
keto. Yeah,
because Rohini wants to nurture, but they also want to make stronger through that nurturance, right? Like they're willing to challenge rather than just heal. So there's like a value there when things are swollen, because the line you said was Rohini helps others grow.
yeah,
So I mean, and there is a bit of destruction and pain involved in that, and then sometimes that can go too far, where they just keep doing it instead of leaving time for the swollen to kind of reduce. And whenever things swell, that's water building up in that area, right? To kind of heal, to create a pocket. So
yeah.
it's like Rohini's comfortable creating that pocket of healing in a way.
Yeah, yeah, you could say that. You mentioned the water. I think actually something to look into. Maybe the lymph, that swelling is probably it's watery. We could call it water, but it's probably lymph, whatever lymph juice or whatever the heck they call it.
Just liquid. Like I
Yeah.
don't think any cares what if it's water or whatnot.
Well, no, anyways, I think there might be something to research with the lymphs and the lymph nodes, the lymph vessels. Those kind of things actually might be some involvement with Rohini. And then that connects a little bit with the immune system as well and the defensive chi. It's a lot with lymph is. And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
but your lymph nodes get larger when more blood cells come to fight off an invading infection. They all essentially pile in, causing pressure and swelling.
yeah,
Often the lymph nodes that swell will be close to the infection site.
yeah. So we could even think infections. Um, but yeah, certainly we'll have to I'll have to add the lymphs up in the health section of Rohini. Um, and that's really why I'm doing this research, because there's still so much to learn. And I appreciate your comments because they help bring things up and bring light to things. So
Yeah.
very, it's very sort of useful. Yeah, here we get, like Mussolini, you get the Satanist woman, uh, cyclist. I'm not sure how he fits in. But I think he was also like, was it blood doping? This guy did, Philip Goma. Little, maybe it was blood doping, maybe it was steroids, but something like that. I think he had a scandal. Um, have anything about him down here? No.
Um, what do you call it when someone has like sketchy things going on? Like their dark side.
When they have what going on?
Like sketchy things going on, like scandals.
Okay. Oh yeah, looking for the right Google word.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So Cofidis doping
yeah.
is what he was doing. Oh no, that's the name of the team.
Well, it was a kind of a blood doping, I think, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna looking for.
Oh, I found this a little bit interesting. We get down to Saturn in the 11th and just how similar these two characters look. Ralph Klein and Gaddafi. Ralph Klein was premier of Alberta, did a lot of cuts, just cut to everything. Yeah, in a way, Gaddafi was sort of doing the same thing, but he was cutting his ties from the Arab worlds and from the Americans, kind of thing, from the foreign worlds. Bit of sports therapy. There we go. Oh, here's the one using the gold act. Oh, jeepers, now I'm confused. Was it her or the other one? I don't think Chris Cohen was using gold acupuncture needles, but this is another. She was kind of a spiritual guru, I guess, of sorts. Okay, not 100% sure of her birth time, but we can see her chart. Again, if we go back to the early question you asked about the other guy and said, oh, he means good or trying to work well for others. We can see in her case that she is quite doing nice work. Jupiter and Mercury in the ascendant, very knowledgeable, very, anyways, a lot of wisdom she would have had in her
But
personality.
Venus would be debilitated though, right?
What's that?
Venus would be debilitated.
No, Venus is debilitated in Virgo. Mars here is debilitated. And
Right.
so she didn't have any, you could say she had no good men in her life because of that Mars, kind of dirtbags, a little bit, big, like, what's his name? She would date that fighter with the big mouth. Guys would be similar to that, you could say.
Gotcha.
Because Mars in Cancer, it has to kind of, in a sense, it has to prove its manliness all the time. And so it's out there being a man all the time, and everybody's like, just fucking relax.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and then the ones who are the real men are the ones who nobody even, they are sitting in the corner, relaxed, taking care of business. And I think there is a bit of that with Rohini, that protectiveness. Some of the fighters might be bouncers, but then someone like Karl Marx, for example, it's like, or some of these people, it's like just them being in the room would be a deterrent from anybody trying, like doing anything to anyone in a way, right? And so there's that sort of sense of protectivity. God, is that the same Susan Miller? I had the other picture of the pretty blonde girl. Anyways, I think I got two different pictures of her, but there's another shot of sun sign woman. And we see working with children, Mr. Rogers. I don't know if I don't think he ever had a scandal. I think he got out of there fairly clean.
correct, yeah.
Yeah, good
He's known as
job.
one of he's known as one of the four horsemen of good. We've got like Fred Rogers, who's that painter guy with the afro?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter guy.
Okay.
Yeah, and who's the fourth one? But yeah, so there's like four of these good guys that it's like, yeah, they've got no scandals, they helped everyone, or what is the four good horsemen?
Yeah, so let's just pull up Fred Rogers' chart for a moment here. And I think we'll probably end on Fred Rogers' chart.
That's a good thing to end on.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah.
He's got a great chart. Oh, Jim Henson,
Yeah, that's the
the
painter guy.
Muppets, I think, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, here we go here. Fred Rogers. So here we get Fred Rogers' chart and let's see, Rahu and Rohini. So he was born in his Rahu Rohini, and so a lot of his shadow was done by the age of 1. You could say he got through that Rahu period. A lot of his darkness and potential for controversy kind of got burnt off then. And then what else? Well, we look at this chart. This is a great, really chart of a really great leader. And when Mars is exalted, that's when you get the Mars, he's brahmacharya. He's not controlled by his desires. And so that's right, able to be one of the 4, like you called horsemen, I think. And so
Yeah.
very controlled sort of a person. Very powerful, must have been a very strong guy. And very like when Mars is exalted, there's no movement that gets wasted kind of thing. They're very productive. They're very, everything they're doing has a point. They're not just wasting their time, you could say. And so, yeah, very nice position. Very highly respected as a leader. He's got this exchange through Mars and Saturn and Ketu also in the 8th house. I don't know. Part of me kind of wonders if this is his chart. I might want to make some adjustments. I'm not sure where this birth time came from. I probably can look here, actually. No, I didn't, but that's interesting. He swam every day in Rohini water themes. Come up quite, well, woke up in the morning, did his prayer, his reflection, his Bible reading, didn't drink, smoke. Beautiful man.
All of the websites have that as a correct time as well that I'm looking at.
Okay, so do they give it an AA rating? Rodent rating, or say where it came from? Because they all take their times from one astro.com.
Reliable 1A, yeah.
Okay, 1A, okay. 1A usually means from memory, so that's
That's
not bad. It's usually fairly reliable.
And he's an earth dragon, as we were mentioning, like the Chinese types. So like that leadership, that dragon coming out, I guess, is where I see it. And that Saturn in the 8th house makes sense for a dragon, I think.
Well, it does to a point, but the thing is, usually if there's some involvement of 10th house and 8th house, I wouldn't expect a good reputation. Now, Saturn and Mars are making an exchange, and so that would be all right, but that would usually give the sort of case where he does something bad that would normally give someone a bad reputation. But in that particular case, it's a good thing. But still, there would be that mark against the reputation somehow, I'd expect, with Saturn in the 8th. But Saturn in the, well, Ketu wouldn't be any good at keeping secrets at all, but Saturn would be. But
because Mars is so effective at making sure nothing was wasted, he wouldn't like splurge kind of thing.
yeah, well, maybe.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
sure.
part of me that kind of wants to turn it like this, because Venus and Mercury then in the 10th is much more entertainment field. Brings the 3rd lord of also media and entertainment into the 10th of his work. Gives him nice reputation. Saturn becomes Yogatika planet, so career and religion, spirituality becomes quite nice. Yeah, I don't know. Need to do a bit of work on his chart, I think, because just looking quickly, this seems to fit better.
Yeah, and that's like that would be his Western chart as well. So I like because his Western would be a Taurus ascending.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what do you find is I guess I can stop the recording now. What do you find is the difference between Western and Vedic? Because to me, like this makes sense.
Western astrology shows the face you show to the world. It
Which is
doesn't
what we're
work.
looking at for Fred Rogers, right?
Yeah, it's not, Western astrology doesn't work.
Well, it does in this case, right? Because we're looking at how Fred Rogers looks like to the world. So in this case, if we use his Western chart, then it makes sense. But if we use his Vedic one, we'd have to kind of know him personally, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Just curious.
Yeah, you could say, no, it's still not working because you could say the Western chart, it might work, but it's only by the luck that his birth time is wrong. So that'd be the only reason that would work if this chart is working. But no, you shouldn't have to know too much personal. Like it's tricky, of course, because well, the first house is who we are, and the second house is the face we show to the world, and the third house is the story of who we are. So there is some tricky things going on in between those three houses, you could say. Yeah, and so who are you? And the West is much more focused on the face you show to the world, your image. That's what's
Yeah.
important. That's who you are. Vedic is like, no, actually, there's someone underneath that image, and that's who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. So like when you're saying like this one to you seems more accurate than the other one for Fred Rogers.
Just on looking quickly.
Yeah.
But just mostly based on that reputational thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like he kind of comes off as a Cancer, and then you said that the third house represented what again?
The story of who we are.
Right, and his story is of nurturing children, which is kind of the Cancer sign, I think.
Yeah, well, that would also fit into there.
Yeah.
This would give them like potentially a Rohini ascendant, which would
Right.
also be a little bit like Cancer, of course, right? That much more.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And this chart is much like just taking much better care of his reputation and all of that.
And I don't like I've having had done charts for multiple people and things that I guess like when I do a transformation package thing like I'm talking about, I take people's Western chart and I look at them and then I say, this is who you've been programmed to be by society, and your Vedic chart is who you're trying to become. So I help them kind of transition from the Western chart onto their Vedic chart.
Yeah.
And Fred Rogers could have been easily just always in his Western personality or in his Western chart, but inside there was all this pain and discomfort from not living out his Vedic chart, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
Just
Um,
sharing.
Rahu in the ascendant gives them someone special, someone to do something unique.
Uh,
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'd have to do a bit more looking, but this does look like it matches quite well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And just out of curiosity, had when you started astrology, did you start when you got to India, or how did your how was your first opening to it? I guess I just forget. I think you shared before.
So I'm just going to stop the recording here for a minute.
Of course.
I